back at the Dracula podcast, and this episode is dedicated to Universal Studios and their continued failures of rebooting. This is the long, twisted story of the Universal Monsters franchise. If you don't like history, you might want to fast forward a little bit, but if you do, this is a great time to get in. Now for the good stuff. Universal was the first in making a shared universe. This was before Marvel. This was before DC. Oh, and by the way, DC, congratulations with Wonder Woman. You finally have a hit. But Universal was the first to do this. They started in 1925 with Phantom of the Opera, kicked it off in sound with Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, Invisible Man, and the rest. These are great films, and most of them are all out on Blu-ray. Problem is, Universal Studios releases these monsters every single year. They repackage them, and people continue to buy them. It's the one sure profitable franchise that they have. And if you've listened to our previous podcast with John Johnson, as we break down the entire Universal franchise, you know exactly what we're talking about. But there have been a lot of updates since then. So, Blu-ray is absolutely the way to go. Let's start. Phantom of the Opera Blu-ray, released in October of 2015. This is by Kino Video. It's a little more expensive than what I would like to pay for a Blu-ray at $22.42. However, the restoration is excellent. This is not the Universal restoration. This is from Kino. Kino's done other good things like Nosferatu and The Mark of Zorro 1940. But the Phantom of the Opera is really good. It has 3 different versions. They pay a great deal of respect. This is one of the really good restorations. The next thing you should buy is the Universal Classic Monsters Essential Collection on Blue. This was released in, surprise, surprise, October in 2012. And this has a ton of stuff. It's got Dracula 1931, it has the Spanish version, it has Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolfman, Phantom of the Opera 43, Creature from the Black Lagoon. All of these are really good movies. And some of these are not available in the packs, which I'm about to get to. That probably will change. There are a few movies that right now, as of this date, that are not in packs, that are really good restorations. The Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Phantom of the Opera. You could buy these separate, but they're in the pack, and it's such a really good deal at $61.93. There's just a lot of good value. It's well packaged. It's very nice. The restoration is unbelievable. It's when Universal did that 100-year anniversary. Jaws and Dracula 31 are the best restorations that I have ever seen. And Dracula 31 is the linchpin of the Universal franchise, so please check that out. Speaking of Dracula, this year in May, Dracula the Complete Legacy Collection was released in blue. That means you get Dracula, the English and Spanish versions of 1931, Dracula's Daughter, Son of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. All of these, great restorations. With all the stuff that's been released, the new films are Dracula's Daughter and Son of Dracula. And at $25, is it worth paying $12.50 per Blu-ray film? Yes, it is. It's really good. I love Dracula's Daughter. I love the humor, and we have tackled that before, so be sure to check our archives. Here's where things get a little dicey. Frankenstein, the Complete Legacy Blu-ray, was released last year in September. Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, Ghost of Frankenstein, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and of course Abbott and Costello. There's a lot of repeats in this, but there are 3 movies that you can't get anywhere else on Blue. Son of Frankenstein, which is my favorite of the trilogy, Ghost of Frankenstein, which is okay, and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which I think is a little bit underrated. Those 3 films, right now sitting at $25.40, are they worth paying $8 and change for a film? Yes, and you get a lot of other stuff. But you're doubling up on films. And unfortunately, we're not done with that. The worst value of the lot is the Wolfman Complete Legacy Collection Blu-ray. It has the Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, the 2 House films, Abbott and Costello, Werewolf of London, and She-Wolf of London. The Wolfman you can already get on the Universal Essentials. Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman and the House films and Abbott and Costello you can get within the Dracula and Frankenstein pack. Werewolf of London and She-Wolf of London are not good. I don't like either of these films. They're really boring. The Wolfman Complete Legacy Collection, take a big pass. Now, if you're looking for something almost all the way original, The Mummy Complete Legacy Collection on Blu-ray. First is The Mummy, the 1932 version with Boris Karloff, and then here come the sequels, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse, and Abbott and Costello meet The Mummy. I don't like the films after 1932. I think Boris Karloff, that was the one, and the rest of these are just garbage. I don't like them at all. It's not worth the value. Pass on this. The Mummy, the good one, is already available in the Universal Essential Collection. So to sum it up, 4 things to buy. The Phantom of the Opera, the Universal Essentials Collection on Blu-ray, the Dracula Legacy Collection, and the Frankenstein Legacy Collection. You get these, that's about as good as you're going to get. Speaking of The Mummy, we're going to tackle that here in a minute, but right now let's pay some bills, and we'll be right back at you with the Dracula Podcast.
Is your hair a mess? Visit Tops Off Barbershop on Hale Street or on the web at topsoffbarbershop.com or call 342-TOPS!
All right, kids, we're back at the Dracula Podcast, and as we promised, we're going to tackle the mess known as the Universal Monsters franchise post Creature from the Black Lagoon. Let's go chronologically. Universal Studios is about one thing. They have one profitable franchise, and it is the Universal Monsters. And if you think that this reboot is new, it's not. In 2004, they produced the abomination known as Van Helsing. If you have a film below 6.8, it's really not that good. On IMDb, it's 6.0, and I actually believe it should be negative 6.0, and 23% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was awful, but it was going to be the catalyst for a new Universal Monsters franchise. There was going to be a TV show called Transylvania, a drama set of Universal Pictures Van Helsing and exec produced by Stephen Sommers. So they go quiet. And this is the kind of stuff that Universal wants you to forget. They go lively in advertising, then they go quiet. Keep that in mind as we continue. And then they move on. 6 years later, in 2010, they released The Wolfman, going a different direction from Dracula. I actually like this film. I don't give it the seal of approval, but it's one of those films that kind of stuck with me. The ending's quite a bit silly, but people didn't like it. It was even lower than Van Helsing on IMDb, but in Rotten Tomatoes, it jumped from Van Helsing's 23 to The Wolfman's 34. So it jumped 11%, but still, people didn't like it. And again, Universal Studios goes quiet. A pattern is starting to emerge, don't you think? In 2013, Dracula Nbc comes out, and it was going to be the catalyst for something new. 7.4 IMDb, which is extremely low for a TV show, but they bump it up to 52% on Rotten Tomatoes, and spoiler, 52% is as high as this stuff is going to get. We have tackled this show. It is absolutely boring. They could have told the whole thing in one episode. Not good. Dracula Untold 2014, 6.3 on IMDb, and 23% on Rotten Tomatoes. Van Helsing, Dracula Untold, 23%. Once again, boring. And now, we have The Mummy. Yet another start for the Universal Studios Monsters franchise. 5.8 IMDb, matching The Wolfman. And then, we have a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, the lowest as it can go. So since 2004, they've tried 5 times. Van Helsing, The Wolfman, Dracula Nbc, Dracula Untold, and The Mummy. And they've given you conflicting information each and every time. When Universal was really buckling down and got serious, they hired Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orsi in 2012 to do the remakes of the whole Universal Monsters library. In 2011, Universal Studios announced that they have signed a 2-picture first-look production deal with Kurtzman and Orsi, reimagining titles from the studio's library including Van Helsing and The Mummy, and we'll get to Kurtzman later. This was right after The Wolfman, so it seems that they have some kind of plan. In 2012, they hire Tom Cruise to play Van Helsing. And if you guys don't believe me, this is from E! Online. The date is May 2nd, 2012. And I quote, Universal announced this week that the A-lister is attached to take the lead in a reboot of the previously Hugh Jackman starring Van Helsing, which is one of several films on the studio's production slate. Unquote. So they've had Tom Cruise since 2012, trying to figure out something. Things start to unravel a bit. And then over a year later, in 2013, Kurtzman and Orsi start to talk again. This was after the Van Helsing plans had been scrapped, and while Dracula NBC was going on. People realized that the NBC show wasn't going to be good, so here we go. This story is from Collider in October 2013. There's an interesting thing that could happen at Universal where they have this amazing library of their old monsters and these kinds of heroes, and the idea of trying to create a universe. Van Helsing, and we're also producing The Mummy for them. We're kind of imagining updating these things. There's more to it, but that's the meat of it. So they had Tom Cruise, they went quiet. Now they try to make a big splash again, 2013. Dracula NBC is on, But then, Dracula Untold comes out. In April 2014, Kurtzman and Orsi break their partnership. That's a story from Collider in April 22nd, 2014. Dracula Untold, a snooze. It didn't do well at the box office, and it was planned to be one of the catalysts for the Universal Dark Universe franchise. Later on, they'll tell you it didn't. However, this is from birthmoviesdeath.com. Quote, a few months ago, sources told me that Universal did some reshoots on Dracula Untold in order to allow it to fit into the larger monster-verse, and word from junketeers who have seen early screenings back this up. Dracula Untold was supposed to be the catalyst again for a Universal Monsters franchise. But it didn't do well, and they're still trying to attack. In Collider 2016, they interview Alex Kurtzman about Dracula Untold. Is it canon or is it not? Kurtzman says no. Then Dracula Untold goes quiet. They're still trying to make something big, so they start to hire big name actors. Russell Crowe, Johnny Depp, Javier Bardem. Stars, not directors. And this is from November 2014. The Universal assembles the writer's room for the universe, Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, etc. So we've got some more writers. Alex Kurtzman, Chris Morgan, Ed Solomon, Noah Hawley, and more. There's a lot of writers here. A lot of scripts. And a lot of writers usually means something really bad. The writer's room. Dracula Untold had 2 writers, Sazama and Sharpless. Universal decides, let's make more. From The Mummy, and this is from IMDb, just the writers. Stories by Jenny Lumet, John Spates, and Alex Kurtzman. For the screenplay, David Kep, Christopher McQuarrie, and Dylan Cussman. So there are 6 people involved with the script of this thing. And we get to Alex Kurtzman as a director. Right before The Mummy is unleashed, they release a statement and a picture of the new team for the Dark Universe. Ooh, Dark Universe. Sounds nice and spooky, doesn't it? It's got Javier Bardem, great actor. It's got Johnny Depp, Tom Cruise, Russell Crowe. I mean, what could go wrong? Big stars. Huge names. Universal's gonna knock it out of the park, right? Maybe not. And for The Mummy, the 5th attempt for a shared Universal Monsters franchise since 2004. Alex Kurtzman, he did a lot of TV to start off with. Then we get to his later writings. The Legend of Zorro, not that good. Transformers, okay. Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, Cowboys and Aliens. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This isn't great. So let's look at his directorial credits. 1 episode on Alias, a TV series called New Day, which never saw the light of day. Haha, nice pun. Then he directed a movie called People Like Us, with Chris Pine, Elizabeth Banks, 7.1 on IMDb, not too bad, but a 53% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is the guy who's directing The Mummy, who's supposed to be the catalyst for this universe. And they were so confident that they hired the stars and they made huge promos about the dark universe. They had videos bringing up the classic monsters and you saw them all, and The Mummy absolutely flops. It's got a 5.8 on IMDb, matching the lowest film in the Universal Monsters franchise since 2004. And it's got a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. The Mummy's not necessarily the most popular monster in the franchise. They tried this back in the 90s with Rachel Weisz and Stephen Sommers. Ugh. And that didn't really do too well, but I mean, they made a few movies out of it. They got some box office, so they start to create this franchise, starting with The Mummy. A good idea, but it's not a good idea. This article's from Variety in June 2017, just last month. And I quote, "But in the case of The Mummy, one person, Cruise, had an excessive amount of control, according to several people interviewed. The reboot of The Mummy was supposed to be the start of a mega franchise for Universal Pictures, but instead it's become a textbook case of a movie star run amok. Several sources close to the production say that Cruise exerted nearly complete creative oversight on The Mummy, essentially wearing all the hats and dictating even the smallest decisions on set. And on stage, Cruise admitted his perfectionist tendencies. Universal, according to sources familiar with the matter, contractually guaranteed Cruise control of most aspects of the project, from script approval to post-production decisions. He also had a great deal of input on the film's marketing and release strategy, those sources said, advocating for a June debut in a prime summer period. A representative for Cruise didn't respond to a request for comment. Instead, Universal refuted that Cruise had a negative influence on the production. Tom approaches every project with a level of commitment and dedication that is unmatched by most working in our business today. He has been a true partner and creative collaborator, and his goal with any project he works on is to provide audiences with a truly cinematic moviegoing experience." If you look at the quote, they did not, however, debunk that Cruise had total creative control. Curious. So Universal put all their eggs in the basket of Tom Cruise. They hired Tom Cruise in 2012, and they released a movie 5 years later, which, and I've read it, is absolute garbage. But it's really not Cruise's fault. He took a paycheck. It's not even Kurtzman's fault. And it's not necessarily the writers on the other part. When you look at bad properties and bad teams and bad entertainment in general, you look from the top down. So we're going to get a little insight on what Universal is thinking. And remember, these are monsters we're talking about. This is a werewolf, a mummy, Dracula, creature from the Black Lagoon. Dracula is a bad guy, a really bad guy. This is from a 2015 article in Variety. We're exploring issues of family identity and questions of where do I belong in this world. And also from this article, two of the dumbest quotes that I have ever heard. Here we go. This is from Kurtzman. "We're creating a mythology, so we're looking at this canon and thinking, what are the rules?" Kurtzman says. "What can we break, and what are the ones that are untouchable?" And also a quote, "Storyboard artists and designers are creating the look and feel of the various productions, and each of the 10 writers working on the project has been assigned a monster to oversee." 10 writers. 10. 10 attitudes, 10 different point of views, 10 different writing styles. Kurtzman explains, quote, "The idea is that we have a deep bench of brains to consult with about how their monster fits into our world as we go forward." Here's another gem from the article, this one from Chris Morgan, a one-time partner of Kurtzman. "There's a darkness inside everybody, and everyone wants to be able to turn a curse into empowerment. These monsters have been in the shadows, and now it's time to bring them out into the light." Well, that is absolute crap. The monsters have always been in the light, ever since Lon Chaney started in 1925. People flock to the theaters to see these things. My suggestion is, try to make a good movie first. And here's how you do it. You get one writer, a really, really good one. Really doesn't have much to do with Universal or any of their business plans. You get that writer, and you let him write. Then you hire a director and let them collaborate. I'll give you a hint. Batman Begins. They hired David Goyer, who was a good writer, but then they had Christopher Nolan. Story, screenplay, and then it got better. And that led to The Dark Knight. And here's another note. Batman Begins was a self-film. It was by itself. You could have that film and you'd be done with it. Also, The Dark Knight, you'd be done with it. Look at the endings of both. Batman is gliding away in Batman Begins. Batman on the Batpod in The Dark Knight. In The Dark Knight Rises, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character finds the Batcave. These are three self-contained stories that just so happen to fit in together. They were meant to make a really, really good film. And that's what Universal needs to do. They need to stop this nonsense of the dark universe and trying to outdo Marvel and DC. Stop it. Make a good film. People will respond. People will want more. Look at Warner Brothers now. They had bad films in Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, but then you have Wonder Woman, a good film just to be a good film. And by the way, Patty Jenkins, a great director. That's exactly how you do it. And even with Marvel, I think Captain America is kind of boring. But if you look at Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, these are films that they can stand alone by themselves. That's the trick. There's one hope left. They're going to release The Bride of Frankenstein in 2019. The bad news, 5 people are already on the script, including Alex Kurtzman. But Bill Condon is the director. Yes, Bill Condon took a paycheck on the Twilight Saga 1 and 2. But here's some other films that he's done. Gods and Monsters, Dreamgirls, Mr. Holmes, and Beauty and the Beast from this year. People liked these films. They were good films. This guy knows how to direct. Is he going to be allowed the creative freedom to do what he needs to do? Or is Tom Cruise or Kurtzman or studio going to put their finger on it and destroy it? That's the question. And now here's what I would do if I were Universal. First thing I would do is I would start with the Kings. The Kings are the Dracula mythos and the Frankenstein mythos. You need to establish the character of Victor Frankenstein. What's going on in his head in modern believers. The creature, a tragic character that doesn't fit in. If you've watched Penny Dreadful, you know exactly how to do the creature. Dracula. It's really simple. He's the bad guy. The films that Dracula is known for, Dracula's novel hasn't been done. It's a long novel, but it does need to be done. But here's the catch. The memorable films, the ones that stand out above everything else, Dracula is the villain. That is Bela Lugosi and Christopher Lee. There are no redeeming qualities about these characters. They just so happen to have a certain amount of sex appeal. But these are bad dudes. And take a look at what Dracula's done. This is from the book. Here are just a few of his crimes. False imprisonment, extortion, kidnapping, assault, battery, rape, arson, theft, homicide, and embezzlement. Just to name a few. Does that sound like someone who could be turned into a romantic hero? As Abraham Van Helsing said in the book, this is a criminal brain. He has acted as such all throughout his history. That is an antagonist. That, ladies, gentlemen, Universal Studios, and others, is what you do with Dracula. If Universal is hell-bent on making a dark universe / franchise, you need to make Dracula the bad guy. You need to make Dr. Victor Frankenstein's obsession. Penny Dreadful pulled it off flawlessly. The creature will break your heart. And if you make those two by themselves, just those two good films, that is your foundation. Lawrence Talbot, someone cursed with a terrible disease? The Phantom of the Opera, whose ugliness is repulsive to others, forced to wear a mask. The creature from the Black Lagoon. Not his fault that he was created as such. He doesn't know any better. It's essentially a wild animal. And it's really sad. So you take these stories, and you've got a winner. The Bride of Frankenstein. It's not her fault that she was created. This is how you make a universe. You tell good stories. You've got great mythologies that you own. Use them. Universal releases their monster movies every single year, whether it be DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, 4K, or the like. Looking at Amazon just by itself, there are 21 different ways to purchase Dracula through DVD, and on Blu-ray, there are 6 more ways to purchase Dracula. And also in the packs, the Universal Essential Collection in blue, the Dracula Legacy Collection in blue, and the whole Legacy collections that took place with the DVDs. There's so many DVD packs that I can't keep up with them all. Universal does this every year, and guess what? They sell. They put different covers on them, and they sell. They put different things on them, and they sell. They redo it and redo it and redo it and redo it again. And it works. People buy it. So what does that tell Universal? Universal needs to make one great film and then move forward. And kids, I'm throwing my hat in the ring to direct Dracula. Universal gives me a call and we will tear it up. Unfortunately, folks, that's all I have for today. I know I've railed on Universal for a long time, but I want them to succeed. I want Universal to get back to where it was in the golden age, to the 20s and 40s. I want to see these great films that people remember. These films that are part of Americana and that are passed from grandparents to parents to children and onward. These are important films. Universal has taken great care to restore these classics. And that is why they need to make a great film. Call me up and we'll do Dracula, and we'll do it right.